the last of the three basic DHSS models, and this is actually the classic DHSS model. And it's also the one where this scenario is furthest away from anything we can find in real economies. So what does this one look like? We've got households, firms, labor, consumption, investment, and R, the resource input. But where's the resource coming from? I'm going to draw it like this. As a metaphor. The resource is like a cake with some strawberries on top. Okay, it's just sitting there ready to be eaten or used as an input. It's free to extract. It doesn't cost anything to cut a piece of cake and put it into the factory. But once you've eaten it, it's gone. Okay, and there's a limited quantity. Okay, so that's the model. So it's a kind of hybrid between the other two, isn't it? In the first one, remember, there were no costs. You just had this fixed resource, but then that one never got used up. In the second one, you had a flow of resource, which could vary, but you had to actually spend effort extracting it. But on the other hand, it never got used up. Right, so let's have a look at this. And again, we're going to end up with, we've got the same production function. So we're going to end up with y dot over y is 1 minus alpha minus beta g plus alpha k dot over k plus beta r dot over r. And now we're back to the original capital accumulation function. K dot is sy investment minus depreciation delta k. So k dot over k is s y over k minus delta. So k dot over k equals y dot over y on balance growth. Okay. So again, we can bring this over and say we can get the same expression as before, that y dot over y is 1 minus beta over 1 minus alpha g plus beta over 1 minus alpha r dot over r. Okay, so that's the same as we've done in all the other cases, but the question is, what's r dot over r? And I'm going to think about how to show you that. Okay, so I'm going to tidy up here, and then I'm going to look at working out r dot over r. So we've got y dot over y is 1 minus beta over 1 minus alpha g plus beta over 1 minus alpha r dot over r. Okay. But now we want to say something about r dot over r. And to say something about r dot over r, we also need to know something about wr dot over wr. Because from given the Cobb-Douglas production function, and given the perfect markets, we know that dot, let's do it again. We just did it not long ago, but can you see this? Yeah. So we've got pi is y minus WLL minus WRR, yeah? First order condition in R is d pi dr is dy dr minus WR equals naught, yeah? And dy dr is beta y over R. So beta y over R equals WR. Or you can rewrite that as WRR equals beta y. So what's this? This is saying that the total payments to the resource are a fixed proportion of GDP. Remember, we talked about that for natural resources, oil and so on. It's like 3 to 5%, so this fits roughly to the data. And it also shows that y dot over y is WR dot over WR plus R dot over R. So if R is growing fast, then WR. If R is growing at the same rate as Y, then we should expect WR to be constant, which, if you remember, it was in the previous model. Or if WR is growing at the same rate as Y, then R should be constant. And that was the case in our first model. But now the question is, what happens in this model? Okay, so what does happen? We need to think about this cake. And we need to have a condition on the cake. So what's the size of the cake? Let's call it S. And how much cake is used up over time is the integral between the current time, which we call 0, and infinite time, of RT dt, right? And this is the total amount of cake we use up over infinite time. And that must be less than or equal to S, mustn't it? So we can actually set up a Lagrangian to deal with this problem of the price of the resource. But at this point, we're just going to do it much more simply. And I'm going to wave my hands around. Okay. And I'm going to say, imagine you own some of this cake. So this cake is privately owned, yeah? There's well-defined property rights over it. But it's not owned by a single monopolist. It's perfect markets everywhere in these models, yeah? So there's lots of different owners of small bits of cake. And they're competing to sell the cake. So when do you decide to sell? If you imagine you're one of the owners, when do you decide to sell? And we can also imagine here, it's not shown in the picture, but there's a financial sector. Because people are impatient to spend money today, they prefer spending money today than in the future. Firms would like to invest today and raise their consumption, which means there's a discount rate, there's an interest rate in the economy. So if I'm wondering about whether to sell some of my cake, I'm thinking, wow, if I sell this, I can stick the money in the bank and earn interest. So if the price of my cake is staying constant, I'm going to sell it, right? Because then I can earn interest in the bank instead. Just has to be better. But everyone else is going to think the same way. So the market is going to be flooded with cake, which means that price, that constant price, can't be in equilibrium. The price should be initially lower and then rising, right? But what if the price was very low and expected to rise very steeply, faster than the interest rate in percent per year? The interest rate is a percentage per year, isn't it? So if the price is expected to rise at a bigger percentage per year than the interest rate is, then what would you do? You wouldn't want to sell your resource at all, would you? Because you think, okay, I'll wait and turn it into money later when I can get much more than I would have if I sell it now and put the money in the bank. So then nobody sells, and that price must be too low because the price is then going to jump up, isn't it? So there's only one possible equilibrium price, which is the price such that the growth rate of the price is equal to the interest rate. And I think in the book I call that WM, which is quite eccentric, but whatever. Okay, so in this model we know that the price of the resource should grow at the interest rate. And depending on the utility function, what's the interest rate going to be? If the utility function is just, what do we have? It's like e to the minus rho t c. Oh, sorry, I'm using subscripts. Sorry, yeah, utility over infinite time is the integral of discounted consumption over time, when discounting is just at a fixed rate, which we call the pure rate of time preference. Then the interest rate is just going to be that pure rate of time preference, rho. So then we know WR dot over WR in that simple case, which is the case we're going to deal with. So then we have Y dot over Y is rho plus R dot over R. And basically, to cut a somewhat long story short, we always have to assume that rho is greater than G. This is very standard in macro, that the long run interest rate should always be higher than the long run growth rate. Otherwise, things kind of screw up, bail out, whatever. It doesn't really, the models don't really work. So rho is bigger than G. Y dot over Y is never going to be bigger than G, is it? So rho is bigger than Y dot over Y, which means that R dot over R is negative, which is just as well, because if it wasn't, the cake is going to run out, isn't it? And then R dot over R has to go to minus infinity at some point, and R falls to 0. If R is increasing over time, you're going to fall off a cliff at some point. This is R, and this is time. The area is the amount of cake you've actually eaten. There's only a limited amount of cake, you're going to fall off a cliff. But it turns out, if there's a constant decline in the rate of use of cake, you can actually keep using cake out to infinity. Okay. We might look at that in the next video. I don't know, I haven't decided. Okay. So far so good. A couple more minutes and we've sorted this model. Okay, so we've got two key equations, haven't we? This one and this one. We can put them together to eliminate, we've got two equations and two unknowns, Y dot over Y and R dot over R. So we can find out both Y dot over Y and R dot over R in terms of things that we know. So why don't we just eliminate R dot over R from this one, and then we have Y dot over Y. I'm going to take this over, minus B dot over 1 minus alpha R dot over R, which is Y dot over Y minus rho, equals 1 minus B dot over 1 minus alpha G. Remember, G is the growth rate of AL, which we know. So, Y dot over Y, 1 minus beta over 1 minus alpha, equals G, 1 minus beta over 1 minus alpha. No, that's plus, so it's minus rho beta over 1 minus alpha. Yeah, because this is plus, and then we've shifted it over, so it goes minus. So y dot over y is g minus rho times beta over 1 minus alpha divided by 1 minus beta over 1 minus alpha. So what's that? Beta over 1 minus alpha divided by 1 minus beta over 1 minus alpha. Okay. So 1 is 1 minus alpha over 1 minus alpha, isn't it? And that's minus, so we can have 1 minus alpha minus beta over 1 minus alpha. So it's that over that, and then the 1 minus alpha is cancelled. So we have beta over 1 minus alpha minus beta. Right. Yeah, because it was this divided by this, and we've just worked out that that is beta over 1 minus alpha minus beta. Okay, so again, we've got a growth penalty here. And it's actually bigger than the growth penalty with a fixed input of the resource, which was beta over 1 minus alpha. This is bigger. Or this. Why is it bigger? Because the resource rate flow is actually declining over time. And of course, we can easily work out R dot over R, which is just this, minus rho, isn't it? So R dot over R is G and then it's this, minus rho, so it's minus rho times this plus 1, which is beta plus 1 minus alpha minus beta. So that's minus 1 minus alpha over 1 minus alpha minus beta times rho. I think that's right. Oh. So that is the model. But of course, it doesn't fit the data at all, does it? In the data, R dot over R is positive, not negative. It's more or less equal to Y dot over Y, and WR dot over WR is close to 0. Okay, I think that's enough on that one.